It's time to start another batch in the freeze dryer. You might not be able to tell because of the videos, but it's been almost 6 weeks since I've run a batch in my freeze dryer. My sister's freeze dryer, this next batch will be 21 on hers. So we're going to do a batch on mine and hers almost the same time, as fast as I can get this one and then go do that one. But they're going to be the same thing. We're doing 10 pounds of corn in each one. One of the reasons I want to do that is to show the difference of the ice buildup. On the new machine, the area that the ice covers on hers is almost from the front all the way to the back. It's very even. Mine, it's very uneven. It's a much smaller space. There's a lot fewer coils around the barrel, so the ice is more undulating between the coils, and it's much thicker. That's one of the reasons I have these little plastic shields down at the bottom, is because the ice builds up so much down low that it will touch the rack and resublimate, and then of course then it desublimates up onto the area again, and it just sets up a cycle, and it really affects the drying portion of it, and I think it ends up putting more moisture out through the pump. So anyway, these plastic little shields, or I'd used the metal ones earlier, the little aluminum ones, but the plastic ones seem to do a better job actually, because they kind of insulate at the same time. We'll get this one started. So I've got the rack in there, got the thermometer underneath. We'll get the disc in place, and we have not made a disc for hers yet, but we will be. And hers will be easier than mine, I think, because the opening on the new one is round. Mine's a full 1/8 of an inch out of round. It's just not a round opening. The new one is quite round, and a little bit bigger too. That's pretty nice. Okay, we'll get this started cooling as soon as it's cold enough, and cold enough means it's as cold as the food that we're putting in. It's going to come out of a freezer that's about 0 degrees, and I want, by the time we get it on the trays and thermometers in and in here, it'll probably be up around 10 degrees. So I want this to be colder than 10 degrees before we put the food on the trays. We'll get this started chilling, and then we'll come back when it's cold enough and be over at the bagging table, or the traying table, and get things on the tray and then get them in. I'm going to run it the way I usually do, which is customize. I'm going to leave the shelf temperature at 120. We have my sister's set, I think, for 125. And so it's pretty close comparison. I guess I could go up to 125 on mine so that it's more even. So let's try that. Okay, there's 125. Start custom. Drain valve is closed. Continue. And I've got it set for a 6-hour freeze time. It's only about 60 degrees down here. It might not need 6 hours, so we can adjust that later. Be back as soon as that's cold enough. In the meantime, I'll go over and get my sister's machine started. So we've got my sister's new machine. Well, actually, I guess it's a couple of months now. This will be batch 21 on this machine. And the main reason I want to do this is to show a water load, or a batch with the same food in the two machines, so I can show the ice buildup difference. It's quite impressive. Okay, let's get this set. Okay, and the defrost baffle on hers is a piece of corrugated plastic with a couple of little slots in it so that it fits right on the shelf, and it's a fairly snug fit so that it holds on to there. And it's not exactly symmetrical. The rack is actually shifted slightly one side, so this side's slightly wider than this side, and so we've got this side up on it so we can put it in the same way each time. We'll cover the hinge things later, but we have done something to the top and bottom a little bit. We're going to add another piece on the top, and then we're also going to be doing a few other things. And the one thing that we wouldn't even consider doing without, and I'll bring the camera over this side. So this is just a foam block that we had. It came some shipping thing, and it's just a nice little piece of foam. It had a 90-degree angle here. We just used a couple of command strips and attached it to it, cut a little bit of an angle so that the door can open most of the way, but now it can't hit this edge. We'll get a thermometer underneath on hers because, again, we like to see what is happening. We don't have a disc on hers yet. We've experimented with a little bit of insulation on the outside, and she does have one piece in the groove, and that seems to make a nice difference already, but we need to get the rest of it to keep that condensation from well, building up and then running down the front and puddling. It's ridiculous. Yeah, I haven't had that issue in 5 years on mine after we changed that, and I'd forgotten how bad it was. We'll get that closed, and we'll go ahead and close the drain valve right now, and we'll get hers started. Yours you don't need to customize, right? Because it doesn't really do anything. That's just for changing the numbers. So I wanted to show just what we have, how we have it set up. The initial freeze of 0, which I have no idea what it means because it's meaningless as far as I can see. The extra freeze time we have set for an hour, which again, I'm not sure how it's using it. We have it for normal, and then for 125 degrees for the dry temp, we have extra dry time of 10 hours. So far, anything less than close to 10 hours, we have needed to add dry time every time. So we're just going for 10 hours. Mine, I think I have set for 10 or 12 hours, but it works differently. So we'll go ahead and save and then start. And of course, we will not be putting it in 15 minutes. We'll be putting it in when the chamber is cold enough. And so when it's cold enough, we'll get the food in here. And cold enough is not 60 degrees or 55 degrees. Cold enough is as cold as the frozen food is. So we will wait until this is down to about 20 degrees and dropping before we put the food on the trays, because the food that we're going to put in here is going to be about 10 degrees or a little less. There's no point on putting food in there and having the food warm up. So we'll put it in when it's ready, not when it says load the food, because it doesn't know what it's talking about. I let the freeze dryer pre-cool for more than an hour because I need to get my wok in. So now I'm back here. We'll get them in my freeze dryer. So we've got 10 pounds of corn going on 4 trays, which means I need about 1,134 grams per tray. Let's get them on there. These little trays have been sitting in the freezer for the last 5 or 6 weeks. Now we'll finally get them back into service. So this is the bag of corn we got at Chef Store, and in this case I got it just a few hours ago and going to get it in there. Nutritional label. Oh, I could probably bring it in closer. So I need to get this tray to 1889 to equal 2.5 pounds on this tray. That's close enough. 1891 on that tray. Going to kind of press it down a little bit, make it a little bit more level, and then just tuck a thermometer into it. That's ready to go. Tray 2, and assuming the bag was the exact right amount, I should need the rest of it. And if not, I know that I need to get this one to 1881 to get to 2.5 pounds. A few extra grams in that one. So 1924. In fact, that has like 40 extra grams. That's nice. They average out though. And for tray 3, I need to get to 1876 to have 2.5 pounds of corn. Okay, so we have 1877, and we'll add the thermometer. And finally, tray 4. Things that are like not sticky or anything, like this corn, I really could have done without the parchment paper. It would have been fine. but I do really like the consistency, so I know the tare weights are the same each time. 1904. Now, these are ready to go in the freeze dryer. We'll go over to the freeze dryer and get them in.
Yeehaw!
I let the machine pre-freeze now for an hour and 25 minutes, because again, I had to get my walk in. And it's really cold. It's like -17 right now. So we'll get those in there. And one of the interesting things is my old machine freezes from the back forward. So my temperature probe is in the back, and I think that's one of the things that affects how soon it shows the cold in comparison to my sister's machine, which freezes from the front toward the back. So the front is cold way before the back on hers. So that's interesting. Just one of those little details that's kind of fun. Starting at the bottom with tray 4. Okay, and those are all about 5 degrees or less. So make sure I have that seal ring all the way around, and I do. Okay, now back to my sister's to get that one loaded with corn. My sister's machine's been running for about an hour and 20 minutes. It says that it's down to 21 degrees at this temperature probe display, which is the one that's on the bottom of that shelf. And this one seems to be pretty accurate until it gets close to 0. Then it seems to diverge pretty far from reality, about 15 or 20 degrees. We've had thermometers in there showing -40 degrees. We have never seen this anywhere close to -40. Usually it kind of stalls around -20 and then jumps 10 degrees, 15 degrees, swings quickly in seconds. So it's got some kind of issue. And the thermometer that's underneath is showing lower than -40. So it's nice and cold. And again, the higher temperature might be in part attributable to the fact that that thermistor is clear at the back and hers freezes from the front to the back. Mine freezes from the back to the front and the temperature shows lower quickly. But it also matches the thermometers in there no matter what the temperatures are. Hers doesn't. So there's some issue there, and I'm not sure if it's on purpose or not. Okay, we'll go get the corn and get them on the trays and get them loaded. Think about 1840. 1850, I'm gonna go with 1850 because that's what I have in there now. Kind of flatten that down just a little bit. I don't even know if you can see that if I'm in the way. So we've got about 1,850 grams on there total, including the tray. And of course we have to subtract out the tray to get the net weight. And with these, got to get the thermometers right inside. Can the thermometer be on the outside of the tray? Okay, couldn't remember if it fit. Oh, that's right, because we don't have the disc in place. It might not once we have the disc. And then tray 2. And this will get the rest of the bag, of course. And it should be a similar 1840 or so. So if I snack a few, then it's 1853. It's really good corn. Tray 3. Okay, there's 1853. Again, squish that down a little bit. And I noticed that there's very little weight difference between my trays and these, but these flex a little bit more than mine. It's not an objectionable amount, but they do flex. Tray 4. And we can just pour the rest of that on there. Want a couple first? Ah, good. So we'll get the rest of that on this tray. You put too much on one end all at once, it gets tippy. And it would probably make more sense to load them, especially the second half of the bag. I could just put it on the cart, load them, and then weigh them, because it really doesn't need to be sitting there when I weigh it. 1838. All right, add a thermometer in that one, and we're ready to get those in the freeze dryer. And we're starting at the bottom and work our way up. Okay, then you put the little plastic disc in place to help seal that. I knew we forgot something, the plastic disc. We do not have a good seal yet. Just like on mine, I'm looking to see if we have a ring around there. Unlike mine, I'm not using the little frosting spatula in there and twisting it. I think if we ever do that, we'll probably make something like maybe a softer wood or something so that it doesn't scratch the paint job. Mine, it's chipped the paint a little bit around the edge. It's underneath the seal, so you never know it. And it's aluminum, it's not gonna rust or anything, so I really don't care. And it does a great job on making sure I've got that seal ring, which is more important to me than a little bit of chipped paint. But it'd be nice to keep one of them in good shape, so I don't think we'll do it the same way on this one. And again, it takes very little to move it, and hers, I've got a little gap there, but mostly right here. I'm going to open this a little bit, pull the seal just a touch, and then push it closed again. Okay, now we have a seal all the way around. We'll be back in 2 days. Oh yeah, on hers you gotta do the next step, I forgot. Gotta put continue. Yay, now it's freezing. It says it's 12 degrees and dropping. For one thing, we put food on there that's 0. That one's showing about 2 degrees, 3 degrees, 0, 0, 0. We got the food in there quickly. The freezer this corn was in was cold. We got it moved quickly and it's still cold. Why would we put it in the freeze dryer if the freeze dryer is 50 degrees when you have 0 degree corn? It's going to literally warm up before it can start cooling down. Anyway, now it's ready. We'll be back in 2 days, I think. Oh, definitely, because it's late at night. So we'll be back in 2 days and check this machine, and we'll see you then. And until then, get that fan turned on. That'll help keep this nice and cool. Got a fan blowing into here to help keep cool air into the air intake area. Okay, so we'll see you in 2 days. So my sister's batch of corn in her machine, which we started just, I don't know, 15 minutes, half hour, probably about a half hour later than on my machine. So everything's about a half hour later. On hers is further along. It's saying it only has a half hour left to go. But I don't believe that. And the reason I don't believe that is it's not warm enough yet. It is doing better than mine. It is hours ahead of mine. That's really good. But it's not going to be done in a half hour. We've got 2 trays showing about 80 degrees, one showing about 90 degrees, and one that is about 105 degrees. So currently the bottom tray, which tends to be the coldest tray, is currently the hottest tray. And as it's going along, that's not too surprising. That often happens where it's warmer than the other trays at some point during the cycle. But overall, the bottom one tends to be the coldest, the top one tends to be the second, and the middle 2 tend to be the warmest. Anyway, it's not going to be done in a half hour, and I don't want to have to deal with it in a half hour, so I'm going to add extra time. And I don't really have to deal with this one necessarily, but I probably will, just so I can record it and get a comparison to mine. This is my sister's. I do want to have that comparison, so I do want to follow it all the way through to show the time and the weights and things and see if there's any difference in weights. I know there's going to be a difference in time, so that's kind of neat. But right now I'm going to add extra time. And this is where having the thermometers in there is kind of handy. Again, because of experience, I know that those aren't dry. And they're not going to be dry in a half hour. So I can add time now before it stops so that it doesn't stop. So I'm going to go ahead and add time. I think I'm going to add about 6 hours. That might be more than it needs. In fact, I'm going to add 7 hours. So I'm going to bump it up to 7.5 hours so that it'll be tomorrow. Okay, and we'll come back and check it tomorrow. And now it may be that it didn't need that much. It probably didn't need quite that much. I'm guessing with those temperatures that it needed, I'm gonna guess 3 or 4 hours. Put a little post-it note on here that I added 7 hours. Okay, we'll be back tomorrow. My machine is showing about 1 hour and 5 minutes left to go. It's about 11 hours and 20 minutes after I checked it last night. And it's down to the hour, about 1 hour to go, which means it jumped the last of those main dry cycle time 1 hour or 2 after I checked it last night. Maybe just a few minutes later. I'd have to check to see exactly how long I have the final dry set for, because I don't remember. The thermometers in the food right now show the top and bottom tray are the coldest at about 110, 115 degrees, and the middle 2 trays are closer to 125 to 130 degrees. It's probably pretty close to dry, but I will, as always, do a dry check. So in about 1 hour, this will be done. I'll take it out, weigh it, and I think I'm going to, because the corn is so thick on the trays, I'm going to stir them around. And probably the simplest way to stir them around without losing anything is I can just dump the tray into a gallon Ziploc, kind of shake it around, pour it back on the tray. Anyway, in that way, it will kind of redistribute everything and make sure that everything's had a chance to get close to the heat. So we'll come back and check this in about 1 hour. In the meantime, let's go to my sister's machine, which has just been sitting and waiting, and I'm sure she hasn't done anything with it yet. So we'll probably have to restart it because it's probably icy cold. Let's go check that one. My sister's machine has been sitting here waiting for, I don't know, a few hours at least. The trays are -30 to -40. So I'm not going to use the warm tray. I'm going to go ahead and add more dry time to make sure that it really gets rewarmed before I take them out, weigh them, and then put them back in again for the dry check. It's probably done because I gave it those extra 7 hours last night. I know that it needed some of those hours because it was not going to be dry in the half hour that it had left. It simply wasn't going to happen. So it needed some of those hours, but it might not have needed all 7 hours. But we'll take these out, stir them around and all that before reweighing them, or drying them more and then reweighing them. Right now though, go ahead and add more dry time. So more dry time, drain valve is still closed, and continue. And we'll come back in a couple hours. So I can do mine in about 1 hour and then this one in a couple hours. Well, depending on how fast I can get back over this, because it won't need that amount of time to get it rewarmed. Maybe I'll do this one first. Okay, we'll be back when we do something. The freeze dryer is down to the last 5.5 minutes. We'll go ahead and bypass that last couple of minutes, get them out and check them. Yeah, I'm gonna just use the down arrow and bypass the last of that. Then open the drain valve. And we'll get these out and weighed. So tray 1. Okay, and that is 996. And now, to kind of stir these around to make sure that everything is dry, I'm going to dump it in the bag and just kind of mix them up a little bit, and then I'll just dump it right back out. That way everything will be stirred around. Yeah, so everything feels warm to the touch, but I don't trust that for making sure food is dry enough to be safe to store. Okay, that'll go back in. And I'm going to rotate this one down one because this is a warmer spot. I want to make sure each one of them has had a chance in the warmer areas. Okay, so tray 2. And get that one back in there also. We'll put that one on the top. Okay, tray 3. And 982. And the fact that the thermometer's in here while I'm weighing them right now doesn't matter, because these weights are only relative weights. So from this check to the next check. So I'm not going to use these weights for anything. It's just to compare to make sure that they finished losing weight. And I'm going to switch that one with the tray 4 position. The tray 4, 994. And that one will go up into the 3rd position. All right, get that resealed. Stirring them around or mixing them is definitely not a requirement. I'm doing that because I want to make sure that I have the best chance for them to be dry quickly. It should be dry already, but I don't know that until I do the weight check. I suspect that tray 1 might still have some water in it. So this is the best way I know to test every piece of food. You could feel it, you could check it, you could use thermal imaging, you could do all kinds of things, but how do you make sure that you've checked every single piece of food? By weighing it, I'm essentially checking every single piece of food. And if I give it a longer time frame, 2-3 hours to dry and to drop more weight, that's a pretty, I feel pretty confident that it's making sure that I've checked everything. Okay, we'll get it restarted. I'm going to press the button more dry time. And it's going to remind me to check the drain valve. It's still closed. Going to continue. And it says that the vacuum pump still needs to cool, but I know that it's fine on here. And so I'm going to bypass the rest of that. And I'm going to go ahead and give it an extra hour and a quarter, and then come back and check it later. Oh, and that's another thing that's interesting. On my sister's new machine, it only does half-hour increments. This does 15-minute increments, and it really doesn't matter. Half hour is just fine. Okay, everything's vacuumed, it's closed, it's going. Now we'll do a similar thing with her machine. My sister's machine's been running again for about an hour and 6.5 minutes. Everything's pretty well warm again. The top tray is the coldest at about 105 degrees, and then about 110, and then about 120 for each of the middle two. So let's get them out and check them. So I'm going to use the down arrow. Okay, now I'll open the drain valve. Come on. Okay, and we've got some little insulation strip pieces that we're testing out on hers, like that were on, similar to what was on mine. So tray 1. Okay, 961. I'm going to go ahead and kind of stir these around. I should have brought a bag. There's definitely some cool spots in there. I don't know if that's because it's not done or just because it got so cold while it was waiting. Get that kind of smoothed back down and put the thermometer back in. Then we'll get that back in. And now I'm also going to rotate the position. So I'll take tray 2 out and put tray 1 down at that spot. It weighs 958. Well, that's interesting. It started out 3 grams lighter and it's still 3 grams lighter. Now I'm going to do the same stirring action. trying to mix it up a little bit so that anything that was kind of in the middle and insulated by the rest of the corn gets moved to hopefully more the top and bottom. Okay, get that re-leveled, and now it can go back in. And I'll put it on the top and get out tray 3. Okay, tray 3 is 954, and once again we'll get it stirred around. Definitely I'm feeling an occasional cold spot, but I don't know if that's because of moisture in it or just because it was down to negative 20, 30 degrees again before I rewarmed it, and maybe it just hasn't all warmed back up. Well, that's what the dry check is for, is to find out. I mean, there's thousands of pieces of corn here. There's no way to check each individual one. No practical way. Move this one down a spot. 949. And this one definitely feels a little bit cooler. So the other coolness might have just been that it hadn't had time to warm up all the way to the middle still, or yet. Enough corn fondling, back in the freeze dryer. And I'll put that one up one spot. So now we've got all the weights. Now we'll get this reclosed and restarted. So I'll make sure the drain valve is closed. I'm going to add more dry time. Drain valve is closed. Continue, and I'm going to add another hour. So we'll check it in about 3 hours. I might have to add more time to this one or have my sister do that if it conflicts with taking the food out of my machine, because they're going to be fairly similar, and if mine's done, I'll need to bag it and I won't be able to get this one in time. So it may end up being more time than this before we come back. But don't go away, we'll be back in just a second. And I'm back, and I almost missed it. There's only 5.5 minutes left. Sometimes I forget. Okay, all of the tray temperatures, the heater's off now on my older machine. The last 15 minutes, the heater's turned off. I'm not sure about the new ones yet, the new machine. But anyway, so my heater's off, which means they're starting to cool down already. We'll get them out, weigh them, see if they lost any weight. If they didn't lose any weight, that means they're already dry, and we can bag them. If they lost weight, that means they still could be dry now, but they lost weight during the 2 or 3 hours, and so I don't know that they're dry, so I will put them back in. The way I do the weight check is for a specific reason. It's the best way that I can think of for money I'm willing to spend to really know if the food is dry. You cannot tell by using an infrared thermometer. You can't tell by using an infrared camera. You can't tell by touching it whether or not it still has some higher amount of bound moisture. If you were to check rice, dry rice, just put that in a microwave, warm it up, and check it with a regular moisture meter, a infrared thermometer, an infrared camera. All of them will show that it's warm throughout, but it's not dry. It still has 4 or 5% moisture in it. I'm aiming for as close to 0 water as I can get, and none of the other testing methods really give me that. If I use a water activity meter, a nice good $2,000 or $3,000 one, you will be able to tell if the sample that you put in it is dry. But the sample is like a 5 or 10 gram sample. It's a couple of tablespoons. What are you going to do with the rest of your 10 pounds? There's no way for you to know if it's dry. Now you could take all of that, put it in a bag, seal it, let it set for a couple of days so that all the moisture that is there is distributed evenly throughout your product, and then take a sample and then test it. That's a long, expensive way to check it. By weighing it, I'm checking the entire 10-pound batch all at once. Well, for in 4 pieces because it's on 4 trays, but all in the same amount of time. Anyway, let's get this out and check it. So I'm going to down arrow past the last of it. There's only 2.5 minutes left. Right now it's showing a pressure of 50. Okay, I'll open the drain valve. And let's see what we have. Now I'm weighing them and comparing them to the last weight check weight. I'm not comparing them to the beginning weight or anything like that. Okay, nice and warm still. So 995, 98, whoop, oh, there's so much wind here. I'm gonna roll this over a little bit more. With the scale, it's fairly sensitive, so even the wind, I might have to block that somehow. I raised this up, which got it more in the wind stream, which is a problem because the wind's coming at this level under here and it's kind of lifting up on the tray. That's a problem. I'm gonna just see if I can block that for a second, see if it makes a difference. So it's showing 996 and now 995. So the wind is lifting that. And when I checked it before, I didn't do this. Okay, so 996, and that's what it had before. So I might have to rearrange this for measuring so that because I raised this up, it's in the airstream. I didn't think of that. But yeah, it's got a good airflow across there. And it's actually, you can see how it's lifting up this paper. Well, yeah, you can see it's got an uplift of air. So it's doing the same thing to that, to the tune of 2 grams. I can block that off. It's an unintended consequences. I did not think of that when I raised this up. I was just looking for a more comfortable work height. Now I don't know if there's a change because I weighed it on here before. So it's probably down by 2. Because if this is lifting up and lowering it 2, it would have done that before also. Well, I'm not going to chance it. I'm going to question my beginning numbers on this, and I'm going to go ahead and put it back in for a couple more hours. So essentially this will be my new starting point. So I'll get tray 2 and I'll block the air. It's showing 997, which is what it was showing before, but when I go like this, it goes to 995 or 996. So I'm not going to trust it. Okay, tray 3.
Yeehaw!
It's actually showing heavier than the last time, and now it shows the same as the last time. Okay, well, I'm just going to go ahead and put them back in and check them this way. And then I'll have to set this up differently because that's a problem. With the older machine like mine, there's no bottom on it. So it's pulling in the air and then it's blowing out underneath also. And because I raised this up before, this was, I think, about 4 inches lower. So the airflow was over the top and it didn't disturb it and uplift it. And I'm going to take these numbers and put them over here. Well, in fact, I'll just simply erase these and use that original set of numbers now. So all of them may have lost a couple of grams. Well, I didn't see that coming. I raised this table to make it easier to work on because it was a little too low. I didn't even consider the unintended consequences of the airflow and the uplift that it was causing. So it seems to lift up the tray by as much as 2 grams. And since I know that it's lifting it up by a couple of grams because I can block the air and it drops down, well, that tells me I don't know what the weight was before. But they might have all been about 2 grams heavier before. Anyway, I'll put it back in there for a couple more hours just to make sure. It's probably fine, but I'm not going to chance it. So I'll close the drain valve and we'll get this started. So I'm going to add more time again. And I did close the drain valve. And continuing and go. We'll be back in another couple hours on this one. Well, at least I saw that and stopped before it got bad. And that'll give me a couple hours to go over to my sister's machine and see how that's doing. And hopefully it's done and she can bag those. I'm back at my sister's machine. I gave it a little extra time. Now we'll take it out and weigh it and check it. And I did check. The air is not blowing across her scale and lifting things up. I can't believe I missed that. It's so obvious now. But luckily this is the first batch that has been involved in it, so I didn't have an issue with it. It's just annoying to not notice that or think of that because it's so obvious. I mean, I've mentioned in other videos about fans and airflow and how it can affect the weights of them by a few grams. I should have noticed that. I made it happen on mine. Anyway, we'll down arrow past the last of this and get ready to take them out. So we're going to take them out and weigh them. So this is showing 37.25 hours right now, but that doesn't show the pre-freeze part of it, right? It's showing 37.25 hours, but you'll also have to add that pre-freeze amount of time, which I think we did in like an hour and a quarter this time by the time we got the food in. Okay, it took a little over an hour and a quarter, so you'd have to add that to that. So now you're at 38 and a half, a little bit more than 38 and a half hours of actual run time. And it's been closer to almost 44 hours, 42 hours of actual time. So it was sitting for about 5 hours waiting. Okay, let's get them out and check them. So I'll open the drain valve. And I definitely want to show the ice in here after I take this food out and get it taken care of. I want to compare that to my machine. This is so much more even throughout the machine, which makes a big difference on it touching the rack or not touching the rack in this case. Okay, so starting at tray 1. Nice and toasty still, and it has dropped. So now it's down to 956. Make sure that it's not touching anything. Make sure that's zeroed. So that's down 5 grams on the one tray in 3.5 hours. They will be going back in. Yeah, I don't see any error with that. Okay, tray 2. That's only down by 1, 957. And the first one was the one that was at the top, and then we put it down lower. It generally does dry slower, this one and this one, which would be tray 4. So we'll see how that works. It's still down a gram. The tray 3, and this tray is noticeably cooler right now. And that's also down just 1 gram. And then tray 4. And that is noticeably toastier than tray 3 was. The middle 2 spots are warmer most of the time, but not 100% of the time. Depends on what's on them. So that one's also down just 1 gram. Okay, let's get that back in there, and then we can discuss a little bit. Okay, I'm going to get that set for restarting. So that batch at this point has a total of 8 grams of loss. 5 grams on just the one tray and then 1 on each of the others. In 3.5 hours of re-drying or more dry time, if none of them had had more than a single gram, we would probably accept that, depending on the type of food. Because if it's something like pineapple or citrus with oranges and things, not blended, but just like slices of oranges. They have all the little cell structures, the little juicicles. It doesn't like to let the water out. So those, even a single gram, I would be concerned. With the corn as open as it tends to be, I probably wouldn't be concerned if they were 3.5 hours and only a single gram maximum. But with 5 grams on the one, it has to go back in, so I might as well just leave them all in there so we can take care of them all at the same time. So we'll get it going, give it a couple more hours, and recheck it. I'm not going to knowingly bag food that has moisture in it. It might have all been taken out during those 3.5 hours. I'm counting on it all having been taken out in those 3.5 hours, so when we check it next time, it won't have a weight loss. But if it keeps having weight loss, I'm going to keep putting it in because you've already spent the money for the food, you've spent the money for the bags, the power. Why not give it 2 or 3 more hours after checking the weight and seeing that it lost weight? Give it a couple more hours to make sure that it stops losing weight. Okay, so I'm going to add more dry time. Drain valve is closed. Continue. And I'm going to go ahead and give it 3 hours again because we have time. We don't have to start another batch today. We could always wait till tomorrow. This will be at 7 o'clock by the time it's all defrosted. And it's another nice thing about the new machine, the fact that the ice is even throughout the whole chamber. It also defrosts faster. Even with the exact same amount of ice, it defrosts faster because it's evenly thin spread out among the whole or around the whole chamber. Mine is twice as thick, but only half as long of an area. It's much thicker ice. It takes a lot longer to finish defrosting. This is nice. And it is slightly quieter, and the tones are different than mine. The pitch of the fan, the pitch of the vacuum pump, the overall sound of the vacuum pump, it's a nicer sound, I think. Part of it is also hers is a softer area here, meaning it has soft things like curtains and carpets and things. Mine doesn't. Mine's basically concrete and bare drywall around it. So that helps to make it seem nicer. And it is nicer. Still not dishwasher. Okay, we'll come back and see you in a few hours. Don't go away, it'll be just a second for you. Down to the last 4 minutes again. I should reiterate that they were probably done last time, but with the air blowing under the trays, I wasn't sure and I wasn't going to chance it. Even 2 grams per tray is more water than I'm willing to put into the bags. So now we'll get it out there again. So I'll use the down arrow to bypass the last couple of minutes, and I'll open the drain valve and we'll get them checked. So tray 1. I just taped a piece of paper up along there so it's no longer spilling the air out here. And I'll move this over here a little bit, make sure, and double check to make sure it's zeroed out. It is. And tray 1, okay, 995. And that's still showing down a little bit. So that's 1 gram. So tray 2, 997, no change. Tray 3, 983, no change. I didn't plan that ahead either. I have to set this one over here for a second. And tray 4, 993. With those numbers, now I'm happy that it's dry. I'll go ahead and stop it with no defrost, make it quieter, and I'll get my little defrost baffle into place. I'm gonna have to build a new one like I built for my sisters. It's a nicer one. And we'll get this fan in place. So I'll wait to turn this on until, oh, I want to get some pictures of the ice in there. I'll move this corn over and then I'll come back and get the time and power usage real quick. So the time on that was just over 45 hours. So the power usage on that corn was 29.55 kilowatt hours. And I'll reset it, get it ready for the next one. My sister doesn't have the same kind, so she has to unplug hers to reset it. So we don't have figures on that one. On some future ones we will. So we've got what was 10 pounds of corn. So we'll get the thermometers out and get them weighed for the net weight. Calculate out how much needs to go in each bag. So we'll get the final weights without the thermometers and find out what it weighs now. So 987, and then we can calculate out what it weighs or how much 1 pound is now that it's dry. So 990, 975, and 986. So now we'll subtract the tare weight, the pan and paper, and find out what they are now. But in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and put them all in a big bag to keep any moisture away from them while we're getting ready to bag. So I'll go ahead and just pour those all together. Okay, 10 pounds of corn. Okay, I'll get the calculations, be right back. So I've got that batch worked out. So that batch of corn went into the freeze dryer on January 5th. It was batch number 600 for me in this freeze dryer. It was frozen corn, and it was Garden Fresh brand, and it said it was 10 pounds. It actually was slightly more than 10 pounds, but that's fine with me. So I've got the gross weight of each tray, and then what the tray with the paper weighs, and then subtract that out, and I've got how much it weighed. So it was 4,599 grams, so just over 10 pounds of corn. And then the dry check weights are meaningless and useless. Their only job is to check how much it weighs when I take it out, and then give it more time, and then how much it weighs afterwards to see if they've stopped losing weight. If they haven't stopped losing weight, they need to go back in. Okay, then the gross weight afterwards, and then subtracting again the tare weight gives me the net weight of the corn. So after it's freeze dried, all the corn total weighs 945 grams. I'm bagging it in 10 bags, approximately 1 pound each, so it'll have 94.5 grams in each one of the bags. And it needs 365.5 grams of water to go with it. Now, the water doesn't really matter. The water doesn't really matter unless you're putting the corn into something that you're worried about absorbing too much water out of, or not having enough water in it. If you're just reheating it, you can just pour a couple of cups of hot water over it and then strain it out afterwards. But we like to get it kind of close. And this will add up to slightly more than a pound, because again, there was slightly more than a pound to start with. So I've got the bags labeled. I have the batch number up on the top, and then I have a little printed label or paper tag that I taped to the bag, because labels are too expensive for me. And again, I've got all the information of what it is pre-printed on it, except for how much water is needed, because I can't do that until I'm finish it and weigh it. Well, I don't want it sitting around while I do that and print, so I pre-print the rest of it. Sometimes I don't even put the amount on there because I don't know how much is going to fit in a bag, if it's going to be a half a pound or a pound. These should do a pound, no problem. Anyway, and then sometimes I'll put some kind of instructions on how to use it. I'd like to do that more, maybe even have a whole separate tag on the back on what to do with it. So if I give it to somebody, I won't have to explain, what do you do with this stuff? I'm using quart Mylar bags. These are the 7 mil Mylar bags. I don't think I ever mentioned on video. We've been getting our bags from PackFresh, and I've been real happy with them. So anyway, I can tear that out. So zeroing out the scale with the bag on it, then it'll show a negative number, the weight of the bag. So I need to fill up each bag with about 94.5 grams. And for this time I'm just going to use a scoop, since I've already taken it off the trays. I could have done it on the trays, but I had that other stuff to do. I wanted to make sure I got those protected from moisture as quick as possible. So now I'm after about 94.5 grams on each. That's pretty close. So if I can get them all that close, that's fine. And again, this is a quart bag, and that's going to be pretty full, but I could probably get a teeny bit more in there if I tried. But I'm going to go for a pound in each. Well, that's how close to perfectly even I got it. I only have that much left. So I'll just divide that in the bags and call that good. And then we'll get the oxygen absorbers and seal them. So the corn is bagged in the 1-quart bags. Now I'm going to add 300 cc oxygen absorbers to each one of them. And as you can see, we've been getting ours from PackFreshUSA. I always forget to mention that. Well, plus they don't pay me to mention it. We've used many thousands of the bags and many thousands of the oxygen absorbers, and we've been real happy with them. Going to tuck the oxygen absorber down the side and move the bag over a little bit. That way I know that I put an oxygen absorber in, and if the count on the bag is wrong, I won't rely on the fact that I had 10 bags and there were supposed to be 10 and I've used them, so I must have them all. Because occasionally the bags of oxygen absorbers does not have 10. Occasionally it has 11, and I think once or twice there's only been 9. Either way, it messes me up, either too many or too few. Now we're going to heat seal the bags. I'm using an Impact brand impulse sealer. We've been using this kind of sealer for all of our freeze drying at my house, and I use this same kind of sealer for many years in a commercial setting. They've done real well for us. Oh, I forgot, I want to get these zippered right away. I'm out of practice on this. So I want to get these zippered right away because the oxygen absorber is exposed right now. Boy, I got out of order. And I'm trying to squish out any extra air I can. And of course you could use a chamber type vacuum sealer or any other kind of sealer that works for you. I'm just trying to squish out the extra air. I would love to do a nitrogen flush system. Well, maybe I'll figure that out someday. Now I can heat seal them. The Impact brand sealer is pretty much a metal sealer. The heat strip is sitting right on top of the metal. That's why I do it twice on the first bag, because it's a big heat sink. I saw that the Harvest Right branded ones have a silicone piece, kind of like this silicone piece that's on the top. It has a silicone piece underneath also, which would insulate it from the metal. That seems like that could be a good plan, because then you're not using or having this big heat sink. So I'm going to put the top of the bag right at the edge of the heat seal strip so that it's right at the top of the bag. I'm going to do this first one twice just to make sure it is up to temperature, because the heat sink part of it. Let it cool for just a couple of seconds. Sealed very high, and it has room for 2 or 3 more tries if this one were to fail. And I've got other videos that show how I check the heat sealer, and I check it every so often to make sure that it truly is sealing the bags. Yeah, beautiful. And the transformer is just barely warm still after 10 bags in a row. So everything's sealed, and as usual, the last thing we're going to do is add the gross weight to each bag, so 122 grams. So 122 grams. So we're writing the gross weight on the bag. That way, if it starts to get heavier, we'll know that water is migrating through that bag, because every plastic bag is permeable to oxygen and moisture. It's just a matter of how fast or how slow. And if it's going between 2 numbers, we'll pick the higher number. Now those are ready to go into a bin for storage. Let's go put them in a bin. These are going into bin 14 front, which eventually, when we get around to it, we're going to relabel them for just without the front and back, and we'll just put where they are on here. So we'll probably have 1 through 20 on the front row, 21 through 40 on the next row, and then the next row will be whatever space is left depending on what else is in the shelves. So this bin is empty. We have a total of, I think, 3 or 4 empty bins out of these 40. And out of the next row back we have 8 or 10 more, and only the small size bins are empty on those. Anyway, these will go in there until we need them. And next, back to my sister's machine, and then she can bag her corn. So I'm finally back to my sister's machine, and this is batch 21 with her machine, and I've only been involved with a couple of the batches, mostly to kind of compare things with my machine. So now we're going to bypass the rest of this time, because I'd added a lot of time to make sure that I could be back. And now let's get these out and weighed and make sure that they did in fact get dry. So down arrow that. I'll open the drain valve. So tray 1. Wow, that is a toasty tray. It says it's about 126. It's toasty. So 10 pounds of corn before it is dried. I'll do the math on that and find out how much it weighs now. It should be very similar to the one in my freeze dryer. It should be extremely similar, except for this had slightly less in her 2 bags to begin with, or at least how much made it to the trays, because it's kind of delicious. Okay, so I'll get the calculations, be right back. I don't know how useful this is going to be for my sister's stuff, because she's kind of a scoop and dump person, not a weighing person, so she doesn't really care what it weighs. Her corn's going to be bagged in little pint bags, because she'll just do a cup or a cup and a half in each bag. And I've got the information of what batch it is for her, and then the dates and everything, and also the amount that it was before it was dried, and the water needed in case she wants to put that on there. But even if she doesn't right now, it will still be on the notes, so she can always refer back to it later if she decides she wants to do something with it that requires knowing how much water to put in it. It'll still be here in notebook, so all the information's still there. So it's really nice to be able to track it back. I've got all the information on it. Now, she wants to start with maybe about 12 ounces. And this cup can hold a 12 ounce amount. So I'll just kind of get it full. So I've got it full up to the top. I can press the edges of the bag. Well, one of the things about just doing by volume, it's really fast. Anyway, the rest of that will go into bags. They'll get sealed with oxygen absorbers, and it's pretty much the same as the others, except for these won't go on my shelves unless she's not looking. See if I can show the ice in there so we can get a comparison and see how much it is built up. I'm trying to get in there to show that. So you can see the ice, it's built up greatly along here. It's 2 inches tall along this. It's halfway up between the first rack and shelf and the second one. Now, let's see if we can go this way a little bit. There's no ice on the barrel for about 4.5 inches back before it has any ice on it right now. And on the other side, same thing, about 5.5 inches on this side. So the ice is quite a ways back, but it's also very thick in some of the spots. Up here it's very thick, down here it's very thick. It's not even at all. It's very thick, very uneven. Same with this side. Starts about 4.5 inches back And again, very thick, comes up right alongside that rack. Same with on the bottom. If it weren't for that plastic shield, it would be touching the rack area. I don't know if it looks good on camera, but it's extremely pretty in person. It's very even, and you can pretty much count the coils on the outside. It looks like at least 13 coils around the barrel, judging from the little bumps of ice around there. Anyway, very, very beautiful. And hers is just so even from front to back. It's a little bit uneven on the very top, but it's just right at the very front portion. Yeah, it's just beautifully even. Boy, I hope that shows up on the camera because it's snowing in there.
Yeehaw!
Yeah, so the ice is a little bit thicker on the front coil or two in comparison to the rest of it on the top, but the rest of it is very even all the way back. It's really, really nice. It's probably not as interesting to other people as it is to me, but this is really beautiful in there. It's almost worth buying a new machine just because the ice pattern is so nice. Wow, I like it. Let's go ahead and get this defrosting. A little defrost baffle. Oh, hey, that's cool. It touches the ice, because I was thinking, oh, I wish I'd made it a 1/4 inch wider on each side. If it was a 1/4 inch wider, it wouldn't fit. In fact, it's tight up against the one side now. And we'll get the piece of paper towel on the top of the door so that it won't scratch it. Let's face it the right direction so that the fan is inside instead of outside. And we'll get that going. This is the water from the corn in my machine, and I was just going to show it this way. It's just under 8 1/4 inches high in this container. That way we can compare it to my sister's machine because we have some of the same exact containers. These are just old milk containers from Costco. And here's the water from my sister's machine for the 10 pounds of corn. It's a little bit less, but it also had a little bit less corn. It had 10 pounds versus 10.14 pounds of corn. So the amount of water in each of the batches per pound of corn comes out almost identical, which it should. So that's good to know. It was freezing before. Now that we've gawked at the ice long enough, let's go ahead and get this defrosting.